before continuing, write where you are from or what time it is. The rain hadn't even started when I heard the passenger door lock click. It was a sharp, mechanical snap that sounded like a gavel hitting a bench. I sat on the cracked asphalt of the abandoned rest stop, my heels sinking into the weeds, pushing through the pavement. Andrew didn't look at me. He kept his hands on the leather-wrapped steering wheel of his Mercedes, his jaw set in that rigid line he used when he was about to liquidate a failing company. He told me I needed a lesson in respect. He told me that 37 miles was a fair price for my arrogance. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I just reached into my pocket and made sure the recording app on my phone was still running, capturing the low hum of the engine and the cold, measured cruelty in his voice. "Actions have consequences, Amanda," he said. He didn't even turn his head as he shifted the car into drive. "Maybe a long walk will remind you who manages the money in this family." Then the tires squealed, and I was alone in the gathering dark. I counted to 60. I watched his red taillights bleed into the gray horizon until they were nothing but pinpricks. The air smelled like ozone and damp earth. I wasn't afraid. Fear is a luxury for people who don't have a plan, and I had been planning for 8 months. I stood up, brushed the dust from my skirt, and walked toward the rusted shells of the old gas station behind the main building. A black truck sat idling in the shadows, its headlights off. The door opened before I even reached it. Marcus stepped out, holding a large black umbrella and a thermos that smelled of strong, hot coffee. He didn't ask if I was okay. He knew I was. He just looked at the empty road where Andrew had disappeared. "Did you get it?" Marcus asked. "Every single word," I said. I handed him the phone. He actually told me to remember my place. We climbed into the truck just as the first fat drops of rain began to hit the windshield. The sound was like gravel being poured onto tin. Marcus handed me the coffee, and the warmth seeped into my fingers, chasing away the chill Andrew had left behind. My brother looked at the phone screen, his face illuminated by the soft blue light. 3 years of watching him diminish you was enough, he said, but abandoning you out here? That's criminal. It's exactly what Rebecca wanted, I replied. We need the pattern. We need the escalation. I thought about the $10,000 that had vanished from our joint account yesterday. Andrew thought I was paranoid for asking. He thought I was weak for noticed. He didn't know that Valentina had already traced that money to a boutique jewelry store, and then to a woman named Nayen. I leaned my head against the headrest and closed my eyes. The leather seat creaked under me. I wasn't thinking about the rain or the miles. I was thinking about the pearl earring I'd found under our bed 2 days ago. It wasn't mine. It was a trophy of his latest conquest, a physical marker of how much he thought he could get away with. For 8 months, I had played the part of the subdued, confused wife. I had let him gaslight me. I had let him tell me I was misremembering dinner dates and bank balances. I had even taken the sleeping pills he suggested, though I always spit them out the moment he turned his back. I needed him to feel invincible. A man who feels invincible is a man who makes mistakes. And tonight, Andrew Mitchell had made his last one. Marcus drove carefully, taking the back roads we had scouted weeks ago. We had practiced this route. We knew every turn, every pothole, every place where a car could hide. I pulled out my second phone, the one Andrew didn't know about, and saw a message from Valentina. She had found 3 more accounts in the Caymans. The total was climbing. "He's been moving assets for 18 months, the text read. "He's bleeding the hedge fund dry." I felt a cold resolve settle in my chest. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was an extraction. Andrew wasn't just a cheater. He was a predator who had been systematically dismantling my life to build a fortress for himself and his mistress. He thought he had rescued me from a mediocre career at a third-tier firm. He forgot that before I met him, I was managing $30 million in assets. By the time we reached the city, the storm was in full force. The sky was a bruised purple, torn apart by flashes of lightning. Marcus pulled up to the side entrance of the hotel. I grabbed the small bag we'd stashed in his truck yesterday. It only had a few things in it, enough to make it look like I'd run away with nothing but the clothes on my back. I need you to look the part, Rebecca had told me during our last meeting. You need to be the victim the world expects to see. I took a deep breath, stepped out into the downpour, and let myself get soaked to the bone. I let my hair go limp. I let my makeup smudge. When I walked into that bright marble lobby, I didn't look like a financial analyst. I looked like a woman who had been discarded on the side of a highway. The night clerk's eyes went wide the moment she saw me. She was young, maybe 22, with a name tag that read Sarah. "Oh my goodness, are you all right?" she asked, rushing from behind the desk with a stack of towels. I let my hands shake as I took them. I let my voice crack just enough. "My husband," I managed to say. "He left me. In the rain. I had to walk." Sarah's face shifted from professional concern to genuine horror. She guided me to a chair and brought me hot tea. Every word I said was being recorded by the hotel's security cameras. Every reaction was being noted. I gave her my maiden name, Amanda Harrison, and a credit card Andrew didn't know existed. Once I was in a room 412, I locked the door and slid the chain into place. I stripped off the wet clothes and stood in the hot shower until my skin turned pink. The steam filled the room, masking the sound of the rain against the window. I sat at the small desk in a dry robe and opened my laptop. The joint account balance flashed on the screen. Another $20,000 had been moved out at midnight. He was panicking. He was trying to clear the decks before I could react. I sent a single text to Rebecca. "It's done." He left me at the rest stop. "Recording is clear." Rebecca replied instantly. "Judge Coleman is on the docket for tomorrow at 2. We're moving for the emergency injunction. Go to sleep, Amanda. Tomorrow, the world changes. I didn't sleep. I sat by the window and watched the lightning illuminate the city. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a voicemail from Andrew. "Amanda, this is ridiculous," his voice said. He sounded annoyed, not worried. "It's been 3 hours. The lesson is learned. Call me back and I'll come get you. Don't make this worse than it needs to be." 10 minutes later, another one. "I know you have your phone. Stop being childish. I'm going to bed. You can find your own way home." I listened to the messages twice, then saved them to the cloud. He was still following the script. He still thought he was the director of this movie. He had no idea I'd rewritten the ending months ago. The morning sun was too bright for a day that was supposed to end in a courtroom. I had been awake since 5, watching the numbers on my screen dance. Valentina was right. Andrew was hemorrhaging cash. He was moving money into accounts in Panama and the Caymans with a desperation that suggested he knew the walls were closing in. He wasn't just hiding money from me anymore. He was hiding it from his clients. I looked at the list of names Valentina had sent over. David Brennan, Eleanor Hartley. These were people who had trusted him with their life savings. He wasn't just a bad husband. He was a thief. I felt a surge of adrenaline that tasted like copper. I had spent 3 years being told I was too emotional, too naive, too lucky to have him. Today, he was going to find out exactly who he had been living with. At 9 in the morning, Rebecca arrived at the hotel. She didn't look like a lawyer. She looked like a shark in a pinstripe suit. She opened her briefcase and laid out the paperwork. The emergency petition was ready. We have the abandonment, the financial abuse, and now, thanks to Valentina's work through the night, we have the embezzlement, she said. She handed me a pen. Sign here and here. I signed my name with a steady hand, my maiden name. It felt like reclaiming a piece of my soul. Rebecca looked at me, her eyes sharp. He hired Richard Blackwood, she noted. The shark? I asked. The same one, she said. He doesn't come cheap. Andrew must have liquidated something big this morning. Marcus came in 10 minutes later with a box of surveillance equipment. He looked tired, but wired. I've got the footage from the house, he said. He connected his laptop to the hotel TV. I didn't want to watch, but I had to. There was Andrew in his study at 2 a.m, 3 weeks ago. I was upstairs, supposedly asleep from the pills he'd been giving me. On the screen, he was opening our safe, photographing my mother's power of attorney forms and the deed to my grandmother's lake house. He was smiling. It was a small, private smile of triumph. He's been building a duplicate file, Marcus explained. Forgeries with subtle changes. If you hadn't caught this, he would have replaced the originals by next month. Then came the next clip. The living room, 2 months ago. Andrew was on the sofa with Nain. She was wearing my silk robe, the one I'd bought in Paris. They were drinking my favorite wine and laughing. She actually believes me when I say the conferences are mandatory, Andrew said on the recording. I've trained her well. A few more months, and I'll have everything transferred. Then we can stop this charade. Nan giggled, a sound that made my skin crawl. The prenup really says she gets nothing, she asked. Andrew laughed. The prenup is irrelevant. She'll never fight it. Amanda doesn't have the spine. By the time she realizes what's happening, we'll be in Costa Rica. I stood up and walked to the window. The city below was humming with life, people going to work, unaware of the war being waged in room 412. I didn't feel broken. I felt crystalline. All the times he told me I was misremembering things, all the times he'd hidden my jewelry, only to have it reappear in strange places, all the times he denied conversations we'd had. It was all there on the screen. He had been following a playbook called Project Fresh Start. Rebecca had found the emails between Andrew and his attorney, Douglas Stern. The key is to make her believe she's going crazy, Stern had written. Gaslight consistently. By the time we file, she'll be too unstable to fight. There's more, Marcus said quietly. I turned back to the TV. This clip was from the garage last Tuesday. Andrew was pacing between our cars, talking on his phone. Jennifer's been perfect, he was saying. She has no idea I'm recording our conversations. Every detail about Amanda's mother's estate. The trust fund from their father. It's worth nearly $2 million, and Amanda doesn't even know it exists. My legs felt weak. Jennifer, my younger sister. I had spent years paying off her gambling debts, covering for her with our parents, protecting her. She had been feeding him information. He's been paying her debts in exchange for family secrets, Valentina said, her voice full of pity. I sat back down, the weight of the betrayal pressing against my ribs. It wasn't just Andrew. It was my own blood. He had found the one person I trusted and turned her into a weapon against me. First contact was 13 months ago, Valentina continued, scrolling through phone records. Regular calls started 10 months ago, always when you weren't home. I looked at the clock. It was 11:30. We have to leave for court, Rebecca said. Are you ready for this, Amanda? Seeing him. I looked at the image of Andrew on the screen, his face twisted in a smug grin. I've been ready for 8 months, I said. He just gave me the final piece of evidence I needed. We walked into the courthouse at 12:55. The corridors were tall and cold, built of marble and mahogany. I wore a navy suit Andrew had never seen. It was sharp, professional, and cost more than he thought I was allowed to spend. Marcus walked on my left, Rebecca on my right. We entered courtroom 4B and saw them. Andrew was sitting at the defendant's table next to Richard Blackwood. Andrew looked haggard. His suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He'd clearly spent the night in his office, probably trying to figure out why his offshore accounts were suddenly frozen. When he saw me, his face went from exhaustion to pure, unadulterated rage. "All rise," the bailiff announced. Judge Patricia Coleman entered the room. She was a woman who looked like she'd heard every lie a man could tell. She took her seat and immediately began reviewing the thick stack of documents Rebecca had filed. "We're here for an emergency petition regarding marital assets and spousal abandonment," she said, her voice like iron. "Mr. Blackwood, I see you've just been retained. We request a continuance." Blackwood stood up, his voice smooth and practiced. "Denied," the judge snapped without looking up. "Your client allegedly abandoned his wife in dangerous conditions. Time is of the essence. Counselor, present your evidence." Rebecca stood up, her movements fluid and confident. "Your Honor, at approximately 8:47 p.m. yesterday, Andrew Mitchell deliberately abandoned his wife at a rest stop 37 miles from their home during a severe storm. We have the audio." She hit play. The courtroom filled with Andrew's cold, measured voice. "You need a lesson, Amanda. Walking home might teach you some respect." I watched Andrew's face go from white to a sickly shade of gray. He leaned over and started whispering furiously to Blackwood. Blackwood just shook his head. "Furthermore," Rebecca continued, "Mr. Mitchell has been systematically hiding marital assets for 18 months. We have documentation of offshore accounts totaling $8 million and evidence of embezzlement from his hedge fund totaling $3.2 million. "Objection," Blackwood shouted. "These are unsubstantiated allegations." "Then let's substantiate them," Rebecca said, produced a stack of bank documents. "Exhibit A through F, Your Honor. Wire transfers to the Caymans, initiated by Mr. Mitchell without his wife's knowledge." Judge Coleman reviewed the papers, her brow furrowing. "Mr. Mitchell, did you abandon your wife last night?" Andrew stood up, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, there was a misunderstanding. It's a yes or no question," the judge said. "I left her at a rest stop, but she had her phone. She could have called someone." "How considerate of you," the judge said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Rebecca wasn't done. "Mr. Mitchell has also been conducting an extramarital affair with his assistant, Nain Rodriguez, using marital funds to purchase gifts. This includes a pearl necklace valued at $12,000, reported as stolen to insurance, but actually given to Miss Rodriguez. My phone buzzed in my lap. A text from Marcus. He's here." The courtroom doors swung open. Tom Chin from the SEC walked in, followed by 2 federal agents in dark suits. Andrew's head whipped around. For the first time, I saw real fear in his eyes. He didn't just look small. He looked broken. "Your Honor," Tom Chin addressed the judge, "we have a warrant for Andrew Mitchell's arrest on charges of wire fraud and embezzlement." The room exploded. Blackwood was shouting about irregularities. Andrew was trying to stand up, and the judge was hammering her gavel with a force that sounded like gunshots. "Silence," she roared. She looked at the federal agents. "Gentlemen, please wait until we conclude this hearing. Mr. Mitchell isn't going anywhere." Andrew sank back into his chair. His phone, sitting on the table, started lighting up with call after call. I could see the names flashing. His mother, his business partner, James, and repeatedly, Nain. He didn't answer any of them. He just stared at the table, his hands shaking. "Given the evidence," Judge Coleman continued, "I'm granting the emergency injunction. All marital assets are frozen pending investigation." Mrs. Mitchell is awarded exclusive use of the marital home and temporary support of $10,000 per month. Mr. Mitchell, you are ordered to stay 500 feet away from your wife. $10,000 a month? Andrew exploded, standing up despite Blackwood's attempts to pull him down. That's insane. She doesn't need— Mr. Mitchell, the judge interrupted, you abandoned your wife in a storm after hiding millions. I'm being generous. Sit down. Andrew collapsed. He looked like a man who had just realized he wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey. As we prepared to leave, the courtroom doors opened again. Nyan Rodriguez burst in. Her designer dress was wrinkled, and her hair was a mess. She looked around wildly until her eyes landed on Andrew. You said you were divorced, she screamed. You said the papers were filed. You said she was crazy. The judge sighed. Ma'am, remove yourself. But Nyan wasn't done. She pulled out her phone. I have texts, recordings. He promised me we were getting married. He said the money was his. Tom Chin's eyes lit up. He approached her carefully. Ma'am, we'd very much like to speak with you. Andrew's destruction was complete. His mistress was turning state's evidence. His assets were frozen, and the FBI was waiting. We walked out of the courthouse and into a wall of reporters. Someone had leaked the story, likely a clerk who recognized Andrew's name. Microphones were thrust into our faces. Mrs. Mitchell, is it true he stole millions? Amanda, how long have you been planning this? Rebecca guided me through the crowd, her hand firm on my elbow. My client has no statement, she said over and over. We reached Marcus's truck and climbed in. The moment the door shut, the noise vanished. I leaned back and closed my eyes. It's over, Marcus said. No, I replied. It's just starting. I pulled out my phone. 17 missed calls from Jennifer, 43 from Andrew, 22 from his mother, Margaret. Back at the hotel, I collapsed onto the couch. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. I scrolled through the messages. A text from my hairdresser. Good for you, honey. A message from Andrew's golf buddy. This is a misunderstanding, right? And then a message from James Morrison, Andrew's business partner. Amanda, we need to talk. There are things about the fund you should know. Things that weren't in the federal filing. Rebecca read it over my shoulder. Set up a meeting, she said. Record everything. By 4 o'clock, the local news was running the story. Prominent hedge fund manager arrested for embezzlement following spousal abandonment. They had his mugshot. He looked haggard, his designer suit replaced by jail orange. My phone rang. Jennifer again. This time, I answered. Amanda, please, I need to explain. She sobbed. You told him about Mom's will, I said. You told him about the trust fund Dad set up. Silence. Then, he said he wanted to help. He said you were too stressed. He paid my debts, Amanda. I didn't know what he was planning. He seemed so concerned. I thought about all the times she'd called me over the past year, asking innocent questions about Mom's health and the property in Wisconsin. Each conversation had been intelligence gathering. He played you, I said, just like he played me. Amanda, I'm so sorry. Realization was finally hitting her. Tomorrow, I said, neutral location. Come alone. Marcus pulled up social media on his laptop. You need to see this. Andrew's company Facebook page was imploding. Clients were demanding their money. Former employees were sharing stories of suspicious activities. One woman wrote, He fired me when I questioned missing funds. Now I know why. But the most devastating blow came from Nyan. She'd gone nuclear on Instagram, posting screenshots of their texts and photos of their trips funded with stolen money. He told me his wife was emotionally disturbed, she wrote. I was an idiot, but he was a master manipulator. There were photos of them in Paris, in Mexico, and even in our bed. At 6 o'clock, Andrew's mother, Margaret, released a statement through her lawyer. Rebecca read it aloud, barely containing her laughter. The Mitchell family is shocked. We believe this is a coordinated attack by a vindictive spouse. Andrew is an upstanding member of the community who has been victimized by a calculating woman who married him for his money. She's really going with that? Marcus asked. After what everyone heard in court. I didn't care what Margaret thought. She had spent 3 years looking down her nose at me. My phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. I answered. Mrs. Mitchell, this is Patricia Huang from the Wall Street Journal. We're running a story on systematic fraud in hedge funds. Would you be willing to share your experience? Rebecca took the phone and handled the reporter. She hung up and turned to me. By tomorrow, this will be national news. Andrew didn't just destroy himself. He's taking down an entire network of corrupt fund managers. The FBI is expanding the investigation. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere in Federal Holding, Andrew was meeting with Blackwood, trying to spin this. But you can't spin video evidence and recorded confessions. My phone lit up with one more message. David Brennan, Andrew's biggest client. Mrs. Mitchell, we are pursuing civil suits against your husband. We know you are a victim too. We'd like you to testify. The irony was perfect. Andrew had spent years telling me I was too stupid to understand finance. Now, his clients wanted me to help bury him. The next morning, there was a knock at my hotel door. I looked through the peephole and saw Jennifer. She looked like she'd been dragged through a hedge. Her hands were shaking as she clutched a manila envelope. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. I thought we agreed on a neutral location, I said. I couldn't wait, she whispered. There are things you need to know. Before the FBI talks to me this afternoon. Marcus appeared in the doorway of the adjoining room, alert. I nodded to him, then let Jennifer inside. She sat on the edge of the couch, placing the envelope on the table. Andrew first contacted me 13 months ago, she began. He knew about the gambling. I don't know how, but he knew I owed $47,000 to some very unforgiving people. He offered to pay it all if I just answered some questions about family finances, she continued, her voice barely audible. And you agreed, I said, my voice flat. I was desperate, Amanda. They were threatening to go to my employer. Andrew seemed like he genuinely wanted to help. He said you were too proud to ask our parents for money. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of emails. These are our conversations. Every one of them. I picked up the first one. Andrew's tone was warm, concerned, brotherly. He wrote about wanting to be a better husband, wanting to understand the family dynamic. The manipulation was masterful. He was particularly interested in Mom, Jennifer said. He wanted to know about her health, her finances. You told him about the Alzheimer's, I said. Jennifer nodded, tears streaming down her face. She made me promise not to tell you. She didn't want you to worry. But Andrew was so persistent. He said he'd noticed signs and wanted to help. I kept reading. The questions grew more specific over time. What properties did our parents own? Who was the executor of their wills? Jennifer had answered everything. Last month, he asked me to get Mom to sign some papers, she said. He said they were for insurance. I actually took them to her, Amanda. Thank God her lawyer was there and recognized them as property transfer documents. That's when I realized something was wrong. My phone buzzed. David Brennan. I put him on speaker. Mrs. Mitchell, I've been going through the client files. Andrew wasn't just stealing from the general fund. He specifically targeted elderly clients, widows, Mrs. Eleanor Hartley, for instance. Within 6 months of her husband's death, Andrew had convinced her to sign power of attorney documents. She thought she was giving him authority to make trades. He used it to drain her accounts. I felt sick. Eleanor Hartley was 78. I'd met her at company events. How much did he take? 800,000, David said, and he convinced her she was developing memory problems. He gaslit an elderly woman into believing she had dementia to cover his tracks. Marcus was taking notes. This changed everything. Andrew wasn't just a white-collar criminal. He was a predator. I have recordings, David continued. I started secretly recording our meetings 2 years ago when I noticed discrepancies. I was scared to go to the authorities because Andrew had connections. But now that he's in custody, I want to provide everything. After he hung up, Jennifer pulled out one last document. There's something else. About Dad's estate. Our father had died 5 years ago, leaving what we thought was a modest inheritance. But the paper showed a trust account in my name alone. He knew about my gambling even then, Jennifer said. He loved me, but he didn't trust me. So he set this up for you with Mom as the trustee. It's worth about $2 million. Andrew had found out about it through Jennifer and had been trying to access it for months. The account was at a small bank in Wisconsin. We need to go see Mom, Jennifer said. She's been holding on to something for you. Something she wouldn't even tell me about. An hour later, we were at the memory care facility. Mom was having a rare clear day. Her eyes were bright as she held my hand. I knew what he was the first time I met him, she said. The way he looked at our house, evaluating everything like he was cataloging assets. Your father saw it too. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a key. Safety deposit box. First National on Hennepin? Your father put things there the week before he died. Evidence. Andrew tried to forge your signature last year, Mom said, her grip tightening. Loan documents, property transfers. The bank manager was your father's friend. He called me, sent me copies. It's all in the box. I took the key, feeling its weight. My father had been protecting me from beyond the grave, and my mother had been standing guard despite her declining memory. There's more, Mom said. The FBI came here yesterday. Not about Andrew's arrest. About something bigger. A network of fund managers who've been defrauding elderly clients across 5 states. Andrew's abandonment of me wasn't just about cruelty. He knew the FBI was closing in. He wanted me broken and compliant so he could use me as a shield or a scapegoat. He never expected you to fight back, Mom said, a small smile crossing her face. Men like him never do. They think kindness is weakness. As we prepared to leave, she squeezed my hand again. Your father would be proud. You're stronger than Andrew ever imagined. Driving away, I thought about the layers of deception. Each revelation peeled back another level of his criminality. He was the center of a web of financial abuse. But he had made one fatal error. He'd assumed the woman he left in the rain would stay there. Instead, I'd become the storm that would wash away everything he'd built. We pulled up to the bank. It was time to see what my father had left for me. The First National Bank on Hennepin felt like a fortress. Jennifer stayed in the truck while Marcus walked me inside to the vault. Mr. Polson, the manager, looked at the key in my hand with the kind of reverence you usually save for a holy relic. When the heavy metal box slid open, my hand started to shake. Inside lay a stack of documents that proved my marriage had been a long-form crime scene. There were forged loan applications with my signature from only 6 months ago. There were property transfer papers from my grandmother's lake house that Andrew had tried to sell right out from under me. He had opened bank accounts in my name that I had never even heard of. My father had documented everything, attaching sticky notes in his familiar, steady handwriting to explain the traps Andrew was setting. Marcus photographed every page while I sat in the cold silence of the vault. Andrew hadn't just wanted to leave me. He had wanted to erase my financial existence and leave me holding the bag for his crimes. 4 months later, I stood on the steps of the federal courthouse. The morning air was sharp, and the media presence was overwhelming. I wore a charcoal gray suit I had bought with my own money, something Andrew had never seen. Inside, the room felt heavy with the weight of impending justice. Andrew sat at the defendant's table, looking like a ghost of the man I had married. He had lost weight, and his designer suit hung off his frame. When he looked at me, I didn't look away. I gave him a serene smile, the same one I used to give him when he lectured me about my mediocrity. Only now, that smile carried the weight of the 8 months of evidence I had gathered while he thought I was falling apart. The prosecutor, Michael Torres, didn't waste any time. He laid out 12 counts of wire fraud, 2 counts of elder abuse, and a massive conspiracy charge. He showed the jury the doctored books and the offshore accounts. For 11 days, a parade of victims took the stand. I watched the jury's faces as Lenore Hartley described how Andrew had gaslit her while he drained her retirement. Former employees testified about being forced to falsify records. On the 12th day, the doors opened and Nayan Rodriguez walked in. She had traded her grandmother's pearls for a simple dress and a bun. She had been granted immunity, and she was there to put the final nail in Andrew's coffin. Nayan testified for hours. She told the court how Andrew thought it was a game to move money around. She played recordings from her phone where Andrew bragged about targeting the elderly and hiding millions from me. He called me the perfect cover because I was sweet and asked no questions. But her biggest reveal was the one that made Andrew's jaw drop. She told the jury that 3 weeks before his arrest, Andrew had been planning to abandon her too for a woman in Costa Rica. He had been playing everyone. Every person in that courtroom realized then that Andrew Mitchell loved nothing but his own reflections in a bank statement. The surprises didn't stop with the mistress. A young man named Christopher Walsh took the stand. He had Andrew's jawline and his cold, calculating eyes. He was Andrew's son from a college relationship that had been kept secret for 22 years. Andrew had been paying hush money, $1,500 a month, out of client accounts to keep Christopher and his mother quiet. Andrew had threatened to destroy the mother's career if she ever spoke up. The prosecution showed 22 years of bank records that proved Andrew had been a predator since the day he left university. He was stealing from widows to bury the ghost of his past. Against his lawyer's frantic advice, Andrew took the stand himself. He still believed he was the smartest person in the room. For 2 hours, he tried to spin a story where he was the victim of a vindictive wife and a confused mistress. He claimed I knew about the affairs and that the elderly clients had authorized every cent. But when the cross-examination began, he shattered. He called the recordings out of context. He suggested I had forged the documents myself. When asked about the hush money for his secret son, he dismissed it as a personal matter. The jury didn't buy a second of it. They deliberated for less than 3 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. 2 weeks later, we were back for sentencing. Judge Coleman looked at Andrew with pure disgust. She told him he had targeted the most vulnerable members of society and showed no remorse. She sentenced him to 96 months in federal prison, 8 years without the possibility of early release. As the bailiffs led him away in shackles, he tried to mouth one last threat at me. "This isn't over." I stood up so the microphones would catch every word of my reply. "You're right," I said. "The civil suits start next month." I walked out of that courthouse into the September air, feeling free for the first time in 3 years. The whistleblower reward came through 6 weeks later, $1.2 million. Combined with the trust fund my father had hidden and the assets from the divorce, I had the resources to turn my pain into something powerful. Marcus found the building, a Victorian in the Whittier neighborhood. We named it the Phoenix Foundation. It wasn't just an office, it was a war room for women who were being financially abused. Marcus installed the security systems, and Valentina brought in the forensic accountants. Rebecca took a leave from her firm to run our legal aid. We were going to make sure no woman ever had to stand in the rain alone again. Our first client was a teacher named Maria. Her husband had hidden their life savings and threatened her with deportation. Valentina found the money, and Rebecca handled the legal filing while Marcus moved her to safety. I sat with her while she cried, recognizing the exact moment the weight of the abuse lifted. Then, on a rainy Tuesday, Jennifer showed up. She was 3 months sober and wanted to help. She understood the shame and the manipulation in a way no professional ever could. Within 6 months, she was running our support groups, helping other women spot the signs of a predator before the accounts were emptied. My mother visited the foundation on one of her clear days. She looked at the photos on the walls, women who had escaped, graduated, and reclaimed their lives. "Your father would be so proud," she whispered. She showed me a clipping from the prison newsletter. Andrew had been elected treasurer of the Inmates Investment Club. Even in a jumpsuit, he was trying to play the big shot. I just laughed, but the biggest surprise came when Nyan Rodriguez walked into our reception area. She had cut her hair and looked humbled. She wanted to volunteer. She started speaking at colleges, warning young women about men who use power to isolate and control. A year after the sentencing, a letter arrived from prison. 4 pages of Andrew's perfect handwriting, blaming me for everything. He said I had entrapped him. He ended it with the same words he said at the rest stop. "I hope you learned your lesson." I had that letter framed. I hung it on my office wall next to my professional certifications. When people asked why, I told them the truth. I did learn my lesson. I learned that when someone shows you they are cruel, you should believe them. I learned that patience and a good recording app can dismantle a monster. And I learned that the best revenge isn't just winning, it's becoming unbreakable. 18 months after that night in the rain, 87 women had found safety through the Phoenix Foundation. We provided the forensics, the safe houses, and the new identities they needed to survive. Eleanor Hartley had become our biggest donor. She used the money she recovered from the civil suits to fund our emergency shelter program. She told everyone at our gala that I had shown her how to find her strength. The foundation was thriving, and the network of corrupt fund managers Andrew had been part of was being systematically dismantled by the FBI. I stood in my office and watched the rain drum against the Victorian windows. I thought about standing on that cracked asphalt 37 miles from home. Andrew thought he was teaching me about power and control. He thought he was putting me in my place. Instead, he taught me that cruelty always leaves a trail. He thought he was leaving me powerless in a storm, but he didn't realize that I had seen the clouds coming months ago. I had prepared accordingly. His act of calculated abandonment had become the catalyst for a sanctuary. He tried to drown me, but I learned how to build a levee for everyone else. The ultimate lesson wasn't about obedience or respect. It was about transformation. He tried to leave me as a victim in the rain, but instead, I became the shelter. I looked at the framed letter on the wall one last time, then turned off the lights and went home to a life that belonged entirely to me. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.